Hi, my name's Sarah Alderson and I design under the name Aldersign, and welcome to my tutorial on a sewn bind off. So a sewn bind off is a really nice stretchy looking bind off. It has a lot of give in it, so I use it a lot for cuff edges, for things like mittens and socks, leg warmers, that sort of thing. So I've used it in a couple of my patterns, one of which is these mittens here. Faradrim. So these are a fingerless mitten and they're knitted from the bottom up, and I used a stretchy cast on like the German twisted stitch cast on, which I have another video tutorial on if you want to look at that. And then the cast off is also, I'll show you on this one here just because the colours show up a little bit better. So can you see now that that's a stretchy cast on? So it's got quite a nice lot of give. So it's really good for like ribbed edges and anything where you're going to need a little bit of stretch and you don't want it to be too tight. So if I put these on, now on these mittens I used a stretchy cast on and a stretchy bind off because I quite like them to be quite loose. So that's the mittens on. Now the cast off, as I said, I did a stretch one, and what I did here is I did a modified sewn bind off, which is slightly different to the plain sewn bind off. Around the thumb though I did the plain one because I didn't want that one to be quite so tight. The reason I did the modified one around the cuff of these mittens is that it's I like mittens, I don't want it to be tight around my fingers and pull them in and dig in at the sides, but I do like not to gape. So as you can see, there's very little gape down the sides of my fingers, and yet I can move my fingers and stretch them apart quite easily without them sort of being tight around my hands. So it just means that there's no gaps, they're not gaping mittens with like holes like that. They will stretch over time, but just a bit of wash and blocking again sorts that out. So it just stops having a really sort of gaping edge, and I think looks quite neat and quite pretty as well. Maybe you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do a sewn bind off. Right, so this is something I prepared earlier. It's just a little tube of knitting. So I've cast on and I've done a few rows. I've knitted it in a magic loop style, and it's just a front row and a back row, but joined in the round. So the first thing you need to do when you're doing a sewn bind off is to cut your yarn and thread the needle. Now the amount of the yarn that you need to leave, I'll just get the tail out of the way, is about twice the circumference of what you're going to bind off, plus an extra about 6 inches. This makes sure that you have plenty to do the bind off and also enough to do a good weaving in, and a bit extra just in case you've underestimated, because you don't want to get right near the end and realise you've run out of yarn. So you thread the needle, you slide the stitches to the end of the first needle. So I've just finished that row there, and this is my yarn. I'm going to put the needle through the first 2 stitches, and then you pull it all the way through. You don't pull it too tight, but you don't want it loose either. So because this goes around the corner, I do need to move it a little bit closer. And then with a needle you're going to come back, but only through the first stitch, so you don't come back through the second stitch. So it's just back through one. And again, pull it all the way through, and then you're going to slide that first stitch off the needle. You're going to repeat that for the rest of the stitches. So the needle goes through the first 2 stitches from right to left, and it just goes down the same direction as the needle, the knitting needle. Pull the yarn through, then you're going to take it back through the first stitch only, and slide that off the needle. Through 2 stitches from right to left, and then left to right, back through the, trying to not catch the yarn underneath, last stitch, the first stitch there, and slide that one off. So as you can see, you can now start to see my bind off edge. It's quite nice and neat, and it's quite stretchy. So I'm just going to repeat that for the last stitches. and back and off. So through 2, back through 1 and off. So each time you do this, you're binding off 1 stitch and off, through 2, back through 1, through 2, back through 1 and off. So that's my nice, neat, but very, very stretchy cast off edge. So I'm just going to move this other stitch around to the other needles. Right, so on this side I'm going to show you the modified version. So this is if you want a still very quite stretchy edge, but not quite as loose as the sewn bind off. So that's pretty loose and stretchy. So this will be slightly less loose and slightly less stretchy, but still has plenty of stretch in it for cuffs. So this time, instead of going through 2 stitches, I go through 3. So the needle is exactly the same process, but this time I'm going from right to left through 3 stitches, and then I'm going back through the last 2 stitches. So the stitch that's to the furthest left you always leave unworked, and then slide those 2 off. I'm going to go back through 3, through the first 2 and slide those 2 off. So as you can see, it's also a bit faster because you're going through binding off 2 at a time instead of just 1. So through 3, back through 2 and off, through 3, back through 2. When I'm coming back, I want the yarn that's come through from right to left, I want that to stay on the bottom, and as I come back through I make sure the needle goes on top of that strand of yarn. It just makes sure that your edge is nice and neat and the yarns aren't twisting over each other. And it's the same with the original sewn bind off as well. So I'll just show you that again. So you come through 3, and as I come back through 2, you can see my yarn is here, and I just come above that to come back through 2 and off, and then the last one is only 2 stitches, so I'm just going to do a normal bind off to sewn bind off to finish that. So through 2, back through 1 and off, and then I've got this 1 stitch that's left on the needle. So to finish off, I go round to the first stitch that I bound off, which was right round here, around the corner, and this time I'm going to go through that one, take that underneath, and I'm going to go through the stitch that was the one that I first bound off. So if you can see, I'm hoping this comes out quite well on the camera, this here is the first stitch that I bound off. The bit over the top there, get that out of the way, the bit over the top is where the is the sewn bind off, it's the sewing part, but this bit here is the stitch that you can see, that one V of a stitch there, then another, and then it'll be the last one there, but it's moved over the sideways like that because of the sewn bind off. But so I'm going to go through my last stitch that's still on the needle and through the stitch that's was the first stitch I bound off, pull it through, and then go back through the stitch that I had bound off, and that just finishes off so that the last stitch is the same. Now I pulled that quite loose as I was doing it, but once I've sewn in the edges and blocked it, it'll be absolutely fine. So if I'm not going to properly sew off the edges, I'm just going to tuck the yarn down here for now to save time, but just so I could show you. So if you have a look now, these are the first stitches that I did the bind off, and as you can see, it's a really nice stretchy loose edge. These are the ones that I did the double bind off. It's still stretchy, but it's not quite as stretchy, and so if you can see, it's actually slightly longer on the back, which is the first ones I did as a normal sewn bind off, than the ones I did on the front as the modified sewn bind off. So it depends how much stretch you like, depends what it's going to be for, and how much you want a gap or no gap. So for things like socks, I'd probably just use a sewn bind off if you want a nice loose cast off edge. For fingerless mittens around the fingers, I tend to use the modified one just because it gives that extra bit of grip in and keeps my fingers a bit more snug inside the mittens. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, please do let me know. And thank you very much for watching.